Welcome to Brain Wellness, the podcast. I'm your host, Mandi NP. What started as all things related to brain health and wellness has morphed into largely brain injury health and wellness, with occasional other neurological topics. My mission remains the same, to help you on the path to a healthier brain. So, without further ado, let's get into the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Brain Wellness, the podcast. Today, I am back solo again because I've had a really busy last few weeks and I haven't even had time to book any interviews. So interviews will resume in the next couple of weeks. I promise you'll hear voices other than just mine. But in the meantime, today I want to talk a little bit about how concussion is not just a one-time event. So before we get into the show today, though, I do want to take a quick moment to, again, thank all of my listeners who have been here through as many episodes as you have been. We are into a lot of episodes. We're in the 180-something-ish here. So lots and lots of episodes have been produced on this show since we started it back in 2022. And end of 2023 is when it really kind of shifted to be more of TBI focused almost entirely after I returned to doing interviews after my own brain injury. So as you've probably noticed with the show, most of the topics now have something to do with traumatic brain injury. And today is no different from that. But as we think about all of those different things, I wanted to take a quick moment to remind you that there are ways that you can help support the show. I do all of this out of the kindness of my heart right now. So it is a labor of love for sure. And as we look at how you could potentially support if you enjoy what you're listening to, there are ways. So in the show notes, there is a link to buy me a coffee. It doesn't truly buy me a coffee because I really don't drink a lot of coffee. Most of what I drink is water. Tonight, I've got a sparkling water. So most of what I drink is water. But buying me a water doesn't look as fancy as buying me a coffee. So even a single dollar for something that you enjoy, every little bit goes a long way. So if you feel like supporting the show, you can click that link in the show notes and buy me a virtual coffee, support the show. I do have a couple of books already in publish that you can get on Amazon. The first one that I did before the brain injury was Migraine Help from a Unicorn Nurse Practitioner. That one still stands. There's still a lot of good advice in there about migraine help. And then from the first year of my recovery from my own TBI, I have my book, Welcome Back, a TBI recovery story from provider to patient. And I had somebody ask me at one of my conferences the other day if I was going to be putting out a sequel to that book. And while yes, at some point I will be putting out a sequel to that book, I'm not quite ready to do that just yet. However, you guys are going to be the first to know that I am going to be releasing a new book. My goal is to get it out by July because we have a book fair for grown-ups here in the Twin Cities that this year in July is going to be held at the grandstand at the Minnesota State Fairgrounds. I have booked a table, so I will be there with my books, including, hopefully if I can get my ish together here, the new book. It is Concussion Help, Advice from a Nurse Practitioner and TBI Survivor. So kind of continuing on in my help series that I had intended to do before my brain injury, but I figured the Concussion Help book would be the next most sensible one in this series because that is what I deal with all the time now. So watch for that to come out. I will be getting the pre-order ready, and if I can, again, get my ish together by Friday here when this show comes out, the link will be in the show notes. So watch for that. Otherwise, we can get into today's show. So again, thank you guys all for being here. Today, again, I wanted to talk about just the fact that concussion is not a one-time event. It is something that can happen and continue to have repercussions. So when we talk about concussion again is a form of TBI. It is a mild traumatic brain injury. So when we look at those levels, mild, moderate, and severe, I really hate those terms. And I tell patients this all the time is I really hate those terms because they're only useful for identifying the moment that the injury happened. We can identify if you had a mild, moderate, or severe injury at the moment the injury happened. We cannot tell you based on those terminology how long you're going to have symptoms, how long your symptoms will last, when will you get better? And that is the golden question that patients ask me all the time. When will I get better? Will I ever be back to my normal self? And I think if I could answer that question, I would probably be a millionaire. And I'd like to say I wouldn't be doing this anymore, but that's a lie because I love doing this show. And I absolutely would be doing it because right now I don't get paid to do it. So clearly I would still do it if I have the money, because I would have plenty of money to run the show and probably do better stuff with the imaging. I don't know. But I would still be doing this because I love doing this show and sharing all the information that I do. That said, when patients ask me, when am I going to get better? Am I going to get better? I cannot give them an answer because I do not have a crystal ball. My magic wand broke before I even owned it. I just cannot tell people how much or how fast they will get better. What I do guarantee my patients is that they will get better because every patient that's come through my door has had some kind of improvement. And that is not just blowing smoke. It is true. That is a 100% honest statement. Every patient that has come through my door in clinic has gotten better. Do they get back to what they were before injury? Not always, but everybody gets better to some aspect. So yes, there is that. Everyone gets better at some point because you're not always going to be as bad as you are initially when your symptoms show up. And I can't even say day one because day one is not always when the symptoms show up. When somebody has a head injury, and this is another thing, again, that I've talked about multiple times on this show, is that you don't have to hit your head. You don't have to lose consciousness. So we've always, for the longest time, thought both of those things were true, and neither of them are true. Only about half of people hit their head. We talked about this last week. And only about 10% lose consciousness. And actually, as according to the last conference that I went to, the Minnesota Brain Injury Alliance conference this past week, the keynote speaker identified that it might even be just 5%. So it might even be less than 10% of individuals that have a brain injury that actually lose consciousness. Because we're not really good at identifying concussions, and many people don't even get assessed because they don't think there's anything to be done. So when we look at that number, the sheer number of people that have a mild traumatic brain injury, a concussion, many of them aren't getting addressed at all. And many of those that aren't getting addressed don't lose consciousness because they don't even realize that that's considered a brain injury when they haven't lost consciousness. And many of my patients don't understand that when I tell them they've had a concussion, that they had a brain injury. So we talk about this all the time. A concussion is a brain injury. It is not a concussion or a brain injury. A concussion is a brain injury. So when we look at that, we need to identify the fact that this is a true injury, that when you have that injury, it doesn't just go away. I had a patient one time who said, well, my primary care provider didn't believe me because they said, well, you're not continuing to have a concussion. And no, that's not what we mean by saying that a concussion is not a one-time event. Concussion is a chronic disease. In 2025, EMS here in the United States recognized concussion as a chronic disease, a chronic illness, because patients can have long-term consequences from that one-time event that we like to call it. It is not just that one-time event. They do have lasting symptoms in a high number of patients. Since 2021, all of the research has identified that 30 to 50% of individuals that even have a mild TBI continue to have symptoms well beyond a year. That, to me, is not most people getting better within a 3 to 4 week time period, which is what we always used to think. In the textbooks, many of them still say that most patients get better within 3 to 4 weeks, and that's just not the case. We don't see everybody getting better in that time frame, and we don't see everybody showing symptoms right away. Can symptoms show up immediately? Yes, 100% they can show up immediately, but they can also show up weeks to months later, days, weeks, months, whatever you want to look at it, later, that people just don't identify. I saw a patient this week who she was in a car accident end of 2025. She went back to work. She was having some struggles, but she thought it was just because, she'd had a few days off of work, so she thought she was struggling getting back. And then she thought it was just because of the holidays, because she was tired, because she was stressed, because of this, that, and the other thing. And come to find out that she was just not getting better from her concussion. And now, what are we, 5, 6 months after her injury, just getting some of the therapies in place that she needed because we didn't identify it right away. She didn't get the care she needed right away because she was partly in denial. She kept thinking that it was just going to get better on its own, and then it didn't. So sometimes patients aren't doing this because they are making things up. They're not doing this because they want to get attention. They really don't want to get attention, and they go on about their lives trying their hardest to do everything that they can normally, but they can't. So they struggle, and they try to get by, and they hide the things that they're experiencing because they think it'll go away and they won't have to do anything about it. And then when it doesn't go away and it starts to cause problems in their day-to-day life, then they come in because either they're having headaches or they're having cognitive difficulties, and those are the things that they want to get addressed. Or mood changes. Those are number 3. Headaches, cognitive difficulties, mood changes. Those 3 things are the things that bring patients to my office for evaluation. Sometimes they have other things too, but really those are the top 3. So when patients are coming in, they've struggled for this for a while and they don't have an answer. And again, now we know 30 to 50% of those individuals continue to have symptoms well beyond a year. Sometimes my patients are happy to hear that, sometimes not, because it makes them feel a little better that they're not just going crazy. Many of them have been told it's all in their head, and that they're fine, and they should be fine because they have this uncomplicated mild TBI, right? Uncomplicated mild concussion. It's not uncomplicated if they still have symptoms months to years later. That is not uncomplicated to me. That is very much a complicated concussion. It is a complicated concussion when they have all of these symptoms that continue on, especially if they haven't gotten addressed. So if somebody's trucking along and they're trying to do their best, they're trying to go to work, they're trying to be the parent to their children, the spouse to their significant other, they're trying to do all the things for everyone, and then they can't because they have this concussion that they really haven't gotten addressed yet. They have a traumatic brain injury that they haven't gotten addressed. So I think I've talked about this before on the show, is that I'm on this global coalition. Coming up next month is the World Health Assembly in Geneva, Switzerland. If you're going to be in Geneva, Switzerland, I do encourage you to sign up. I will put the sign up in the show notes for the event, the side event that we're having for TBI on May 17th. I will be speaking at that event, talking about my experience as a provider and a patient from that person with lived experience viewpoint. So through the lenses, if y'all could see through my prism lenses, that would be the lens that we're going to look at from that recovery standpoint, because it has not been a one and done event for me. It has not been a one and done event for me. I will say that again and again and again. Yes, I was in a car accident in April of 2023. And yes, we just crossed that 3-year anniversary of that car accident from April of 2023. But I do not get to leave all of that in the past. I don't get to leave it all at the hospital on April 13th of 2023. It all came with me, and it all unfolded over the weeks to months in advance that were to come. And it took me almost 2 years to get back to work as a nurse practitioner because it is a chronic illness. It is not a one-time event. So again, as I look at all the things that I've been through, at some point there will be a sequel to my Welcome Back book, and we'll get it back all the way, or whatever I want to call it. I'm not ready to do that yet because I'm not back to work full time. And maybe there will come a point that I'm ready to do it, even not being back to work full time, just because I want to share the information. So that might come sooner than later, but my goal was to be back to work 100% before I wrote that book, because I wanted to show that you can do it and you can get there and you can get to that 100%. But the more I work, the more I realize that there are still obstacles to that. So in February of this year, February of 2026, almost 3 years after my injury, I got to working 4 full days per week. So I am officially 80% at work. Yay! Super exciting, right? Sure, it's super exhausting. So because I still have activity intolerance, I still have cognitive fatigue, I still have slowing of my brain, I still don't have all of the things that I had before my injury. We've talked about this before on the show. I am Mandi 2.0 because some of the things were an upgrade and some of the things were meh. When you get that upgrade on your phone, again, some of those things are great, some are not so great. And that's kind of where I am since my injury. Some things are great, some things are meh. So as I'm looking at this whole recovery path, as I add something new into my repertoire, as I added additional time at work, as I continue to try to add exercise, as I add working on my book again, as I add going to all my kids' activities. It's fatiguing. It's tiring. My brain just wants to shut down. And this week was a really good example. So I am late getting out my sneak peek this week. I usually post it on Wednesday mornings. This is not going to get posted until Wednesday night this week because I had a whopper of a headache kick in this week. And I've been going. The last 3 weeks, I've given a presentation every week. Actually, I think it's the last 4 weeks. I've given a presentation every week. I went to the Capitol for Brain Mapping Day. I went to one of the local conferences here in Minnesota for the QRCs, the Minnesota Association of Rehab Providers. I went out to LA and spoke at the Neurotech conference that I talked about last week on the show. Last week, I presented here in Minnesota again at the Minnesota Brain Injury Alliance conference. Week after week after week, I did all these presentations, and it's things I love doing. I love educating others. I love getting the word out there about concussion, about whiplash, about all the technologies that can be used, about all of the different options to treat patients. What can we do that's covered by work comp? All of these things to help the patients. I help other people to the detriment of myself sometimes. But as I did all of these things, it felt so good to feel mostly normal again, to go to these conferences, to present, to connect with others, make those relationships, get connections around the globe, truly, with some of these conferences. And it was amazing to make all of those relationships, to make all of those connections, to educate others, to answer questions at the end of my presentations, to do all of these things. But it was exhausting. And in the end, I ended up taking more naps. And on Monday this week, my headache was starting to kick in. By the time I left work, I was really slow in my processing and coming up with answers for patients' questions. And Monday night, the headache just ramped up and I went to bed in tears. Not too proud to say it. I went to bed in tears that night because my head hurt so bad and I had to call out of work on Tuesday. Headache didn't completely go away. I got more treatments, didn't go away. I went back to work today with a headache, with dizziness, but I didn't want to miss out on helping my patients some more. So I rested over lunch. I came home, kind of sat for a little bit, and now I'm doing the show for you guys because I need to share this information about what happened and what it looks like, and just putting a face to the chronic nature of concussion. It is not a one and done event. It is not something that you just have it happen and it goes away. For some people, yes. Some people are just that lucky. They have this little bit of a concussion, maybe some symptoms for minutes to hours, and then they are fine. And that used to be me until, I want to say it was in 2013, I think it was. Either 2013 or 2014 when I had my last concussion prior to the car accident in 2023. I hit my head on a car door. There was a long story there. But I tried going to work and it did not work out very well because I could not focus. And I ended up taking a day off of work after that. So I missed a day and a half of work. That had been the longest time frame that I had any symptoms up to my car accident in 2023. And I was a very active kid. I climbed trees. I fell out of trees. I fell off my bike. I'm the youngest of 5 girls, and my sisters would occasionally go in the ditch with me in the passenger seat. So I had my fair share of concussions growing up, and nothing ever lasted until 2023. That was the straw that broke the camel's back for me, and I have not ever been the same since. It's another question that I have for my patients all the time. Is there one episode when you can say you never were really back to your normal self prior to that injury, or after that injury, excuse me? And that's when we talk about, okay, what are you like now, and how can we move past this? Because there's really 2 ways that your brain heals. One essentially is that the damaged cells wake up and they take on their normal job and they do the things they're supposed to do. And if they don't do that, the other way to heal is through compensatory mechanisms. The neuroplasticity in the brain picks up and we make new connections and we find new ways to do some of those same old things that we used to do, just different ways. So we try to learn to be just as successful by doing it differently. So once we do all of that and we learn to identify what's getting better on its own and what we have to learn new ways to do things. That's where all of the therapies come into play. The PT, the OT speech, all of those things, the potentially the neurological chiropractor, all the things that I talked about last week when I shared my whiplash presentation that I talked about at the Neurotech conference, all of those other treatments, the red light therapy, neurofeedback, TMS, the nerve stimulators, all of those different things are beneficial at helping us make new connections, learn how to compensate for those things, and find new ways to manage in life. And sometimes we have to manage by taking on a different job, doing work in a different setting. I used to work in the hospital. I'm in the clinic now. It's a different setting. I still get to be a nurse practitioner, but it looks different because I can't tolerate all the noise and hustle and bustle of the hospital. So sometimes it's finding that setting that you can work in. And sometimes it requires additional accommodations, extra time to do your work, working in a quiet area, darkened area, something that you don't get all of the triggers for all of your symptoms anymore. And that's okay too. We need to do all the things that will help us be successful and not kick up our symptoms too much, because that's our big thing, is that we don't want to be miserable all the time. Sometimes we're really good at pushing ourselves and then we get miserable. But I digress. So looking at this longevity of a concussion, at what's happening, how do we get around it? Again, those cells either wake up or we learn compensatory mechanisms. And that's how we get through the new version of you, because you don't always get to go back to what you were before. And I struggled with that thought for a very, very long time. It took my husband telling me over and over and over again that I would not be the same person I was now compared to before the accident, even if we hadn't been in the accident. Everybody grows. Everybody changes over time. You will not always stay the same. We are not stagnant. Our brains are not stagnant. We can create new connections. We can learn new ways to do things. We can learn to be productive and meaningful and find joy and meaning in our life, even when we have chronic symptoms. Chronic was another term I talked with a patient about this week also. A patient had had symptoms for many months at this point, which meets the definition of a chronic condition. Once you've had it for more than 3 months, something becomes chronic. Chronic does not mean permanent. It does not mean you always have to have that same problem. It just means that it's been there for a certain period of time. It meets the definition of chronic. Chronic does not always have to be a bad thing. I don't have the same memory that I used to. I was very blessed with my memory before the accident. I had very much a photographic memory. I could see something and remember it. In nursing school, nurse practitioner school, when I would read something off a page, it was in my brain. And there were times that if I was struggling, I was trying to remember an answer to something, I could literally picture the textbook page in my mind, find the information on that page. I cannot do that anymore. That is not how my brain works. I take lots of notes now, but you know what? I still get the job done. I still get through everything. I remember what I need to in order to be successful, productive, helpful, all the things. And I write things down because that's my new norm in that. And that's okay. It took me a long time to get to that point to say that it's okay. Partly, I think, because I have found new purpose for what I do. And prior to my injury, I was a stroke provider. That is what I did. I lived, ate, breathed, dreamed about strokes. Why, you ask? Because I'm crazy and I'm a neuro nerd. That's why. But everything I did, it was because I wanted to give the best care possible to patients that had strokes. That was what I did. I created a stroke clinic down in La Crosse, Wisconsin. I did all of these things to better the population of individuals that had strokes. It's just a different kind of brain injury than what I deal with now. It's also an acquired brain injury. It's just not traumatic. So there's that. Funny thing is that when I started out, my very first job as a nursing assistant was in a group home with adults with traumatic brain injuries. So I have come full circle, and I totally forgot about that until recently. Also, funny thing is that as a teenager, I thought I wanted to be a motivational speaker. And guess what I've been getting into now? Speaking. So that's another thing that you can do to support me a little bit too, I guess, is hire me to speak at events. Invite me. I would love to come speak at anything to help anybody understand concussion, because as we were trying to identify our perfect audience for this, really it's anybody. Anybody can have a concussion. And while I don't want to be everything to everyone, I want everyone to know about concussion and what we can do. So kind of coming full circle on that one too. But again, I digress. So looking at how we move forward. How do we move forward? What do? We share the information. We try to get as much out there as we possibly can. We try to make changes where we can, like going to Geneva, Switzerland next month and talking about the need to make TBI a chronic health condition across the world, across the globe. Concussion is not an accident that occurs to any one population. No gender, race, ethnicity, sexuality, identity of any kind is free from the potential of getting a traumatic brain injury. It can happen to anyone at any time. So that is why it is so important that we share this information and get more people to identify that concussion is a TBI, which is a chronic health condition. It is not a once and done type of thing. It is not you get in a car accident and then you're done with it. It's not how it works. It's not how it works, folks. I wish it was. I wish I could tell you that everybody gets 100% better, but everybody doesn't get 100% better. And I'm living proof of that. However, you can find purpose and you can find meaning and you can find a way to help others who've been in that same situation so that we all can have a better experience. So that is my mission. That is what I do. I bring this voice because of my lived experience, because of my passion that I have for this. And I hope that I give you all a little bit more passion as well. So as you go off into your day, I hope that you think about concussion a little bit differently. I hope that you realize that it is not just a one-time event and that little thing where you thought that you saw stars, you blacked out, you got your bell rung, you realize that there might be something more to it than just that. And you might need to get some assistance to figure out how best to recover from this injury that potentially leads to some chronic, long-lasting symptoms for you. So I hope you learned something. I hope you found this valuable. If you have more topics that you would love to hear me talk about in the future, please leave a message wherever you listen to this podcast and share it with somebody else you think needs to hear it. I love to hear from you guys at any time you have concerns, questions, comments, thoughts, all of the things. Thank you for being here. We will see you next time. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Brain Wellness, the podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, I encourage you to subscribe, like, leave a comment, and share it so that others can benefit. Please also consider supporting the show by buying me a coffee. The link is in the show notes. You can also go to www.brainwellnesssolutions.com to catch the latest info and get links on all of the social medias there. See you next time.